Hey y'all, this time around we're going to build some 6-inch blast gates for a dust collection system. Now I've built these blast gates before in my previous shop, and those were for 4-inch pipes, so the process is really very similar. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything. So a lot of this is just cutting down the pieces and creating the initial shapes so I can replicate them. I really like how these blast gates worked. I had the 4-inch blast gates built and they worked really well. So no need to change anything. Everything just had to be scaled up to accommodate for the 6-inch metal pipe. Now the exact radius of that metal pipe, because it's flexible, I cut out a few circles to refine the radius. So here I'm just seeing how loose it is and adjusting my circle a little bit so I can cut out and test and get that dialed in. It doesn't have to be perfect, but close is good. And with that center piece that slides back and forth ready, I could cut that off, or cut that out. Now I didn't need to make too many of these. In fact, I really only needed to use 2. I ended up making 4 of these blast gates. But at the end of my dust collection runs, I'm still using my 4-inch blast gates that I had previously, so I'm reducing the pipe at the end. But these are used sort of where the pipe split initially, and we'll see that. So with the center part done, just cut out the outer triangles. And all this, I'm using my bandsaw and this angled sled on the table saw, but of course this could all just be cut out on the jigsaw, make your life easier. This is not a highly precise project, so you could cut those curves out previously and these shapes out with the jigsaw and just make your life easy. And I'm just using some spare plywood, which is why part of this side is painted white. It's from a previous project, just had left over. But with that in place, cut the circles out. So just mark some dimensions. And I'm going to cut one out and then use that as the template to mark all the rest. Again, use your jigsaw. I've got this scroll saw. I think on the previous one I had created a router jig to cut like a really precise circle, and that was just unnecessary. Cutting these out on the scroll saw worked just fine and was every bit as accurate as I needed, so, and it's faster and easier. Now those circle discs, don't need them anymore, but they were just good for spacers here. I'm drilling out all of the 1/4 inch because I'm going to use a 1/4 inch bolt to run through these and hold them together. So just lining these pieces up, cutting them out, or drilling them all together. Make things a little bit faster. And then time to put it together, and the hardware I used, I'd simplified that as well. I think on the previous build I had used, well, you can see I'm just using some simple spacers within, and then a washer and a bolt and a T-nut. And that's all. Very simple. So I think previously I had thought maybe I'd need a lock nut or a lock washer, but didn't. This has worked just fine. I've had these up and running for a couple months now, and they are working great. And to tighten these, I'm just tightening them by hand because that's all they need. It gets a good friction fit sliding mechanism is easy enough to use, but still holds in whatever position you put it in. Then once I had those together, I cut off the corners, and these were big enough that I just had to put it on each side of the sled when I was cutting these off. So cut off all on one side and then cut them all off on the other side, and then to put these together, put in a little spacer and then just a few brad nails to hold that in place, and then just put some screws in. Really simple. It's such a super simple project. So just taking some more of the corners off. And then finally, to keep these in place, just put some stop blocks, drill those and screw those into place. The exact placement of this is not terribly important as long as it works. So as long as you get a full good opening and then cut it off. I'm just using the simple HVAC pipe here. So put together some pipe and then I'm going to cut these off. And I just found for me it was really easy to use this method. I was just looking at sort of a line on my table that I could reference to draw a straight line while I held it against my table saw fence. Then drill a hole and cut these out with the jigsaw. There's special tools made for cutting this type of pipe that I'm sure work a lot better. This is a little bit tricky as it flexes, and it's certainly, you gotta go a little slower over where the seam is, but it still worked fine. I used this method for assembling all of the dust collection, and it worked just fine for me. So a little jamming out while we deburr the edges, and then put some tape just to hold it in place. The difference with this and the 4-inch pipe, because the 4-inch pipe I had used was rigid plastic, it was easier to know exactly what the circle circumference was going to be, but this worked just fine as well. And similar method of just using some liquid nails to hold it in place. So make sure you get a lot of the glue down in between the plywood and the metal, and then another bead to really seal it in place. And then I used a couple sort of thick washers and stuck those in the bottom to lift it up just a little bit from the ply so that doesn't catch. And then I could do that to each of these, let it dry, and then turn it over and do it to the other side as well. And to hold these in place, simple pocket screws. Easy peasy. I did find this method of using a bucket to hold it down, and I used that when I was gluing the other side as well, because it's a little trickier now that you've got a pipe coming out. But this is it. They work great. Like I say, really the main two I'm using are here where my dust collection sort of goes each side of the shop, and so I've got a handle set up so I can move that back and forth, and that works fine. But at all the ends I've still got my 4-inch old blast gates. So thanks for watching.